a legacy is one of those conscious things that you say, this is how I want to be remembered. I think that's a great exercise to do, because I think that if you can define what that thing is, it ends up then being a little bit of your North Star. It's what you can measure kind of all future opportunities against.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I'm your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a good one. Our returning guest has trained thousands of bookkeepers in hundreds of training sessions across Canada and beyond in both desktop and online accounting software since 2012. She is currently the product evangelist for accounting solutions at Sage, and she's always amazing to speak with. Rachel Fisch, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was so kind.
Yeah, well, we love having you. And I know our community in North America, so many know you, so many love you, love working with you. And so it's always great to have you on the show. And for those that don't know you yet, I would really love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've got going on these days.
Sure. Yes. Actually, you had mentioned product evangelist for Sage Accountant Solutions, and that's actually a brand new role. I've only been in it for a couple of months, and so I'm still ramping up, still doing a lot of learning. But basically what that means is that I'm now on the product side of the organization and really making sure that we're kind of building from the inside out all of the tools and things that bookkeepers and accountants need, to serve their clients and to grow their practices. So I'm really excited to kind of be a little bit more kind of in the weeds as to how Sage operates as a software company, which is cool. Prior to that, I really kind of focused on the accountant community as a whole, which is still something that I think all of us who are in the accountants channel at Sage, we all need to be doing, and we're all going to continue to do that, which is cool. Prior to that, I was the national bookkeeping leader at Deloitte. Prior to that, I had my own bookkeeping practice, which is where kind of I started to build up that network of bookkeepers, as you mentioned, and really got involved in the bookkeeping community, and that passion just hasn't faded since. And then prior to that, I was in industry for about 15 years or so before kind of making the leap to start my own practice. So that's a little bit about me, kind of industry side, my own practice, big firm side, and now kind of on the software side, but it's cool.
So well said, and contained a whole lifetime of experience in the industry, and so eloquently. So thank you for doing that.
My pleasure.
It is great to have you. And this episode, having you back, we wanted to discuss legacy, and you have left a legacy, obviously, just in your explaining what you've been building, really is building your legacy in the community and in the industry. But back in August of 2019, one of our bookkeeping colleagues, Elaine Orr, passed away suddenly. She was a wonderful person, and she had I know, a positive impact on so many. She was a guest on this show. And I'd like to talk about how she impacted you in your life.
Yeah, and I think that, generally speaking, for those who've experienced loss in their lives, I think, anytime you have a traumatic event like that, you tend to kind of take a moment to reflect a little bit. And so I've done a lot of that, over the last several months since she passed away. And really it kind of came down to there wasn't really a part of my life that she didn't impact. We got to know each other actually over social media. We were both very active on social media. And you kind of start to, for as much as social media can get a bad rap, sometimes I think that you really can make genuine connections. You find people that you have things in common with, that you share a similar sense of humor with, that, you're both helpful because you're answering, bookkeepers' questions in Facebook groups and stuff like that. And Elaine was definitely one of those people. In fact, she was connected to a friend of mine back from like elementary school, and they met on social media. So it was so weird to kind of see these worlds colliding, but not only was she an amazing encouragement, as we got to know each other better, then we, jump on Skype calls or Zoom calls and just really connect and share and challenges that we had and kind of lifting each other up and encouraging each other. But so not only was that kind of on the bookkeeping side of my business or dealing with difficult clients and stuff like that, but it just really quickly seeped into, the rest of my family life and the rest of my personal life. And so she really was kind of a bonus grandma to my girls who, they would even send little emoji chats back and forth. They'd send a picture of themselves, a little selfie, and she'd do a little doodle on it and send it back and things like that. So, she really was really ingrained into, again, more than just kind of the professional side and somebody that I could go to for trusted advice, and really brutally honest conversations about how things are going. But, as I said, kind of seeped into the rest of my personal life as well.
Yeah, it is amazing. The couple of things there really is just social media, connecting with others. It's you can connect with millions of people if you'd want, but meaningful connections take time and really are an investment. And so,
absolutely,
maybe talk a little bit about that in terms of just your experience on social and how
Sure.
she was and how you were and how you nurtured that relationship.
Yeah, and I think, again, kind of in meeting in that way, it was that we were both trying to be helpful to a similar group of people. She actually had been involved in Startup Canada and helping out small businesses prior to me meeting her. And after somebody passes and you start to talk about to other people who love her, as much as I've loved her, then you get to know kind of everybody's stories on how they all met and, meeting the dozens of people where, they met her long before I did. Well, showing up on Twitter chats about, the Startup Canada and things like that, getting really involved in that. I do think that sometimes, social media, every once in a while, probably usually on Mental Health Day, I post a little reminder that, remember, social media is just a highlight reel. So in looking at, people's lives or the perception of their lives, or at least the portion that they post on social media, just remember that you're only getting kind of the best of that. It's funny, I get comments about, how much I've been traveling and things like that. And I said, well, it's because I don't post pictures at home of me in my yoga pants drinking a coffee with my laptop at the kitchen table. There's nothing interesting about that. There's nothing exciting about that. And so, making sure that, first of all, that we remember that what you do see, there is a little bit of a facade or a veneer, maybe I'll say, when it comes to social in general. But where you can find, those helpful people or those people who have similar connections with you or similar approaches to you or, things like that, I think there absolutely is the opportunity to create genuine connections in some of these communities and things like that. I do think that you kind of get out of it what you put into it. And so to get involved in, Twitter chats that are, whether it's industry-based because your practice has a certain industry niche, and so you want to get involved and kind of show yourself as an expert in that area, or whether it's just, within a great Facebook group, like your Successful Bookkeeper Facebook group. So that's a great opportunity to really connect with like-minded, professionals and bookkeepers, and to start making some of those connections. What I've also found is that that's usually kind of where maybe the foundation gets laid for a really great connection, but the meat of it is kind of always behind the scenes. So for Elaine and I, for example, although we met, in Twitter chats and had mutual connections or met in Facebook groups, it was really those, Facebook Messenger posts or those Zoom chats or those behind the scenes when it was just her and I kind of building on the initial connection that we had made, generally in social media. I think that's where, that true connection really happens.
And I would imagine as well events that lead to actually physically meeting. You likely had the opportunity to meet her, and many do online at events, conferences. The Institute of Professional Bookkeepers of Canada is one that's very familiar to many of our listeners, and a great place to each year connect with those people that you've built relationships with online and foster it and then take it to new directions.
Absolutely, and that's actually where we first met, was at IPBC, and I think it was almost 2 years after we had originally met online and started chatting. But I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, IPBC Niagara, which was several years ago, and so that's where we met in person, and then we were at several of the same conferences that year and kind of buddied up, and it's always nice to have, those familiar faces. I think one of the best things about IPBC is, and this has been said, I don't know who has said it first, but it's kind of like a high school reunion, those people that you connect with throughout the year, and then everybody comes together, and it is always really great to see everybody again, see how their business is growing, see how they are growing, professionally and personally. It's always a really great, as you said, a fantastic time to really connect in a way that face-to-face, sharing the same air kind of space that you just can't get kind of anywhere else, and to have that close connection for sure.
Yeah, so summer camp. It's like summer camp.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And summer camp can exist for us adults too, right? It
can, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Interesting. It was where I actually first met Elaine as well, was in Niagara. And I think it's a testament to the organization in Canada around fostering positive long-term relationships. Many long friendships have been gelled at that conference, which is great. And it speaks to, building the foundation of a relationship, but more so when you do this with several people and you have common aims and purposes, like Startup Canada, helping nurture small business in the Canadian ecosystem, business ecosystem, is a purpose and a very important, honorable thing to be working on. When you bring people like that together, that's laying the bricks of the of the legacy that you want to have. Maybe speak a little bit about the keys to building legacy in your bookkeeping work and also life.
Yeah, I think, as I said, when something traumatic or life-changing happens, you certainly start to do a lot of reflection. And I've done that over the years. I've had several changes in my life within the last maybe 4 years or so, between being in my practice and going to Deloitte and then going to Sage. And even in the move to Deloitte, that also required a physical move across the country as well, and moving my family and introducing them to Ontario. I was born here, but they had never been. So you start to do quite a bit of reflection. And I started thinking about, of those who I connected with, who, as I said, loved Elaine as much as I did, and who, were reaching out. And I think when there's been a loss, and I've had losses, in my own personal life as well, but when there's been a loss, typically what happens is the people who remain, some don't really know how to deal with the loss and end up kind of drifting off a little bit, but others end up gluing themselves even closer together. And so it was amazing to see kind of the outpouring of love and support that all of, those of us who wanted to stay connected, to the people that Elaine connected us with, just continued to get tighter. And it started to think about, the consistency of how people talked about Elaine after she passed, how she had encouraged them, how she had spoken, truth to their lives, how she had, been encouraging them and challenging them. And for those who don't know Elaine, she was just one of those amazing ladies who always spoke truth in love, but not necessarily softly. There was just no bones about it. She didn't have time for dribble. She didn't, have time for fakeness. It was, if you were with Elaine, you were talking about really real things that kind of cut to the heart of anybody. And so one of the things that I found is as I was saying, the consistency in how people were talking about Elaine. And it started to get me to think about this concept of legacy is, I wonder if Elaine, first of all, knew the impact that she had on the people that she was talking to, because I think for her, she may have genuinely thought she was just having a chat. And for the person on the other end of the line, it was, I genuinely didn't know what to do until I had this, chat with Elaine, and it was exactly what I needed to hear to continue moving forward. How much a legacy is one of those conscious things that you say, this is how I want to be remembered. I think that's a great exercise to do, because I think that if you can define what that thing is, it ends up then being a little bit of your North Star. It's what you can measure kind of all future opportunities against. So although we can say that consistently Elaine was known for helping people, for encouraging people, all of those things, I don't know how much she thought about, when I pass away, this is what I want remembered of me. But what then I've seen in my own life is, as I said, that kind of self-reflection is, I wonder what people would say about me. Is there a consistency to my interactions with people that would have them saying similar things about me? And I'd like to think that I'm helpful, and I'd like to think that, I'll reach out and lend a hand wherever I can. Will that be others' perception? I don't know, but as long as I can continue as I move forward thinking, will this allow me to help other people in my life and in my community? Then that's that kind of North Star alignment that I was talking about, right? That if that's the pattern that I've seen in my life so far, then, and I like that about it, then I want to make sure that I continue that going forward.
It's a valuable exercise in terms of just determining what one's life can be about. Many of us can get caught into the hamster wheel and not pay attention to these things, but there's a few themes that come along with that, which is we don't know how long we have on this planet. None of us do. And so paying attention to what, the impact we're having around the people that are around us, every day, our family, our friends, our colleague, our customers, all of these things is important to cherish, number one, and also improve all the time. And when you bake a cake, if you bake another one, you always try to make it better, right? So I think that's key as well to the legacy, which is just knowing what is it that you're doing on a daily basis. Because if you're building a legacy that you would be proud of to watch from the outside looking in, it is a more enjoyable life, period.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as I said, sometimes, in grief, people have two completely opposite, reactions. One is to bond together. The other one is to kind of drift away. And so sometimes maybe the thought of that exercise of what do I want to be remembered for, that may be a painful or a difficult thing, but you could maybe take a different approach that accomplishes the same thing. And that's, what would my kids say about me? What would my next door neighbor say about me? What would other bookkeepers or other members of my community say about me? And so that can maybe bring it can do a similar thing in that kind of alignment that I was talking about, but maybe just be an approach that might be more comfortable for you. So, if the wording of legacy and, the thoughts of, our time on earth being, shorter than we'd all like it to be, are uncomfortable, there are different ways and different approaches and different angles that you can get that similar kind of mindset shift without thinking about it quite like that. And I think the part of it is, how many times do you talk to bookkeepers or accountants and they say, I kind of accidentally fell into accounting or bookkeeping, or, I was going for this other career and then, life happened and I ended up starting my own bookkeeping practice. At some point, it's good to at least reflect on, what is my actual intention here? As you said, that hamster wheel can be a very powerful thing. You're just going to keep doing what you're doing and keep, bringing in the money and paying the bills and doing all of those things. But at some point, there needs to be but is this what I want to be doing? Is this what I'm passionate about doing? And it's amazing how much something that you love doing, that you're passionate about doing, and again, those feelings of what do I want my kids to say about me? What do I want my community to say about me? How much those can actually be aligned when you are pursuing your passion. Again, I think the consistent thing for me between my practice, my time at Deloitte, my time here at Sage, and even the couple of different roles that I've had here at Sage, there has still always been a consistency for how can I continue to advocate for accountants and bookkeepers, because I know what that's like to be, one of the 33,000 in Canada that still feels like you're alone. And I think that was one of the key areas that Elaine and I bonded on was this, before the real collaboration kind of blew up in the bookkeeping world, I think there was very much a, if I share with you what my challenges are, what my issues are, you're going to take that and use it against me, or you're going to, we're competition. You might steal my client. And we both very fiercely believed that the more we shared and the more we connected and the more we collaborated, the better it was for our practice and the better it was for ourselves as bookkeepers and the better it was for our clients. Because until then, my clients were only ever dependent on what I knew, not what I knew, plus what Elaine knows, plus Lisa knows, plus, all of these amazing bookkeepers and practitioners. And you kind of get into that mind trust where you're drawing on expertise instead of always needing to be that person. And there's a lot of pressure that can come with that. And so, that was really that initial bond, was this strong belief in this community and collaboration within the bookkeeping community for sure.
I think it's somewhat unique in industries with the bookkeeping industry and the profession. I think the work perhaps that gets done, it takes someone who has compassion for others. I mean, obviously, attention to detail is another one of those strong points, but compassion and wanting a genuine desire to help another with their mess,
Absolutely.
It brings together these types of people. And so it's one of the reasons I love doing the work that I do is it's just delightful to interact with the community and with the individuals in the community, which I think many perhaps have not maybe even identified that. So being able to connect with you've got this great community. If you are doing it alone, you've got this great community that will have open arms and be very positive, very constructive. We mentioned groups before, getting into a group and being able to feel like you belong, those sorts of things. Obviously, there's exceptions to those rules, but we do our very darndest to make sure that it is positive, is constructive, and that there is a place for those types of relationships to happen and gel. So definitely not doing it alone and coming together. Since this occurred and you've done a lot of reflecting on it, how have you taken this reflection now into your career?
Oh, gosh. Well, I would say that Elaine passed away shortly before I was already kind of facing changes within Sage and what my next role would be. And so it really started to get me to think about that exact thing. What is it that I want to be doing? Where can I be learning? And one of the things that I identified within myself is that even though that I had been at Sage for over 2 years at that point, and so now it's been, 2.5 years, I really hadn't kind of explored the full Sage experience almost. And so, for example, one of the things Sage does is we've got Sage Foundation. And so we donate product, we donate dollars, and we donate time through Sage Foundation to nonprofits. And we actually have 5 days throughout the whole year that we can take to help nonprofits through the Sage Foundation initiative, which is awesome. The whole corporate responsibility thing is a phenomenon anyway. And I actually hadn't done that. I was kind of a remote employee. I really didn't get plugged in. Since then, though, I've actually reached out for Princess Trust. They have an Operation Entrepreneurship program, which is mentoring veterans. And so I've really tapped into that. That's how I'll be spending all of my Sage Foundation hours this year. So, in previous years where I had like 0 out of 5 days, this year I'll be using all of them up with commitments that I've made through that mentorship program. Again, I'm helping, but I'm doing it in a way where I can really tap into these extra resources that I don't have on my own. And the other one is just a huge passion around diversity and inclusion. And so Sage corporately has made some changes into the organization surrounding how they manage and work with diversity and inclusion initiatives. And so I'm getting tapped into that. Again, my role change, Elaine's death, and this revisiting of am I really tapping into my passions in a way that allows me to continue to help, to support, to build up and encourage? I really took that to heart. And so I found some really great initiatives that I can tap into for that. So very thankful for that time of reflection that made that happen.
It is refreshing to, it is an interruption in one's life, whether it's loss, losing a job, a pet, having illnesses, whatever it is in our life, there are interruptions. And these interruptions can either be positive or negative. And it's up to us to determine how we will shape them. And you have shaped this to be something that you can take her legacy forward, which into your own life and make a difference in many other people's lives. And fortunately, you work for a wonderful organization that has thought long about this and made terrific investments into community and making a difference, being a responsible corporation. So it's lovely to hear. And as always, it's been fantastic just having a conversation about this. There are many that would likely be suffering from grief or loss. It can be an elusive thing to happen to one, and to how to navigate yourself through this. So if you find yourself in one of those situations, reach out for help. There is so many places to get help, family, friends, and I hope to actually have a grief counselor on the podcast in the future to talk about it as well. So I think it's something that's not talked about often, and there are many people that suffer from it. So thank you for bringing this conversation and the idea for this episode. Such a refreshing and lovely conversation.
My pleasure, and that's almost maybe not a challenge, but every single person has experienced loss to some degree. Different people handle it in different ways. And I mean, don't get me wrong for that. I mean, when I first, heard of her passing, I just felt that my life had come to a stop, that everything was frozen in time. And, going through the periods of grief and having a grief counselor on the podcast would be phenomenal. I am really looking forward to that episode. But I think that there are stages to it, and you do need to work yourself through it. Did I figure out all of the things that I wanted to do and have taken advantage of, since then on day one? Absolutely not. There was time to go through each of those stages, but after several months, this is where I'm ending up, and I'm happy for that, and can only thank Elaine for that encouragement that got me here.
Wonderful. It is very true. So recently, I know an author of a book called My Good Grief, which is Journey Through Grief. I don't exactly know the title. I'll have to post it. But Mom lost her partner, and my father passed a couple of years ago. And so I bought the book for my mother, and she read this book. It's a very quick read. Well, she called me back and said it changed. Like, she's in her 70s. It changed what she thought about grief. She uncovered all of these areas in her life that went way back, that she had no idea that there was still a place of grief that had been unresolved. And it really set her free. Just reading this book a couple of times set her free and raised her to a different level of being able to return, I guess, back to the joy of life. And so this conversation and the experience with my mom, and I really want to have the author on to talk about it, and because life is short. And so whilst we can't minimize loss and grief, we also, there is a way to let it shape us and to have it be a part of our life and to use it to our benefit, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm not a pro at speaking about it, but
well, it becomes a catalyst, right? And you get to choose what you become through that process.
That's right. So we'll have a link to the book as a resource. And again, Rachel, on behalf of our listeners, I just want to thank you for your generosity on being on the show and just for sharing so transparently of what's going on in your life.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
Beautiful. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.